Hello, good morning, welcome to Ireland M. It's Monday the 28th of November.
Now let's take the news with Claire. Thanks, Sinead. A very good morning. An IRA leader who's serving a 20-year jail term is due to give evidence to the Civic Tribunal today. Michael McKevitt was convicted in 2003 of membership of the real IRA and is serving time for organising terrorist activities. The Civic Tribunal is investigating claims that Gardaí colluded with the IRA.
The murder of innocent delivery driver David Darcy in late 2011 by Rose Lynch, a middle-aged mother of three, horrified the public. In the criminal world where hitmen dominate, female assassins are a rarity, but when they kill, it has the power to shock us to our very core.
Over 5% of Irish homicides are contract killings, and that figure is rising year on year. We've got one of the highest rates of gangland assassination in the developed world. What does that say of this country?
To help me explore why Ireland has become a mecca for assassins, I'll be joined by forensic criminologist David Wilson. As a former prison governor and an academic, he has over 30 years' experience of the criminal underworld. Together we have identified 4 types of assassins operating in these islands. Novices, journeymen, dilettantes, and masters. Each has a unique set of characteristics and traits.
In this series, we're going to try and delve into the mindset of the hitman and try and explain why Ireland has become one of the contract killing centres of the planet.
But he wants her body.
The execution of David Darcy came completely out of the blue. He's what's known as a straight, no criminal associations and no criminal record to speak of. His death devastated his family and shocked the community. But why was he killed? And why was Rose Lynch ordered to carry out that hit?
Rose Lynch was born and raised in Limerick, a city steeped in Ireland's struggle for independence. Since the days of the Irish Volunteers and the Citizens' Army, the Irish Republican movement has looked to recruit both men and women to the cause. For the most part, these women were young and unmarried. What makes Rose Lynch stand out is that she was a middle-aged mother of 3. She doesn't quite fit the profile of an active IRA combatant. I want to find out why Rose Lynch became a killer. I'm meeting up with journalist Nicola Tallant to see if we can find some answers.
She was born into a very Republican, very well-known Republican family. Her father is Joe Lynch, a known Republican activist throughout his life.
Is that enough, you get a fucking way from me. Take it away, you fucking bastard, you.
And her mother, Nora, had past generation relatives who were involved in the 1916 Rising, and they could trace ancestors back to the Fenian Rising of the late 1800s. Her parents themselves were steeped in republicanism. When she was born into it, she was the third of 4 children. She was quite a serious child, even when she was very young. People remember her as a child who'd go up to the shops and buy paper and pens with her pocket money, and she'd come back and write poetry with that. You know, it was always there within the household. And then when she was about 7, it was a time in Irish history that Jack Lynch had actually decided that it was possibly time for the Republic to invade the North because of the way the Catholics were being treated up there.
Well, the day was the worst trouble.
And who was doing the shooting?
The soldiers and some of the men too.
How many children do you have?
6.
And where will they all be going?
Somewhere down the south. We don't know where we're going yet.
Now, around that time, we saw an influx of essentially refugees from the north down to the Republic, and there were women and children who were taken out of the sort of the war zone it had become up there, and they were put to stay in. A lot of religious orders took them in, and homes took them in, but the Lynch household took at least 40 children in from those refugee families as such.
With the Troubles in the North, as a child, you know, was she playing war games, and was the enemy always the British Army?
She was, and I mean, she'd go to school in the morning, she'd come home and all these kids would be there. They were sleeping in bunks in her house, sharing bedrooms with her, and they'd go and they'd play, and the games that they'd play would be the British Army versus the Catholics or the Irish. So very, you know, a time of your life at that age that you would be very influenced by something like that.
Hey Donal, I hear you've got an interesting case.
Yeah, Rose Lynch. Because it's not only a unique case, but it's a woman, and female hit persons are very rare.
Oh, that is unusual. Gender plays a huge role in this type of crime, which of course is why we call them hitmen. I know of only one hit woman from our research in England. As we know, a lot of the motivation is external in this kind of crime. So let's see if the radicalization plays a part in why Rose Lynch decides to commit this hit.
Journalist Henry MacDonald remembers well those dark days at the start of the Troubles and the experiences of Catholics in Northern Ireland.
I mean, do you think that the arrival of refugees down south in her home, there were 40, may have had a profound effect upon her?
It might have, because it imprinted on many people's memories. I was a refugee myself. I was sent after internment to Mosney camp in Butlins, and we spent 6 weeks there, courtesy of the Irish government. So yeah, we were kind of like these exotic creatures that suddenly arrived on the doorstep of a fairly peaceable state, and we were all full of stories. There was a great fear in areas like where I came from, which were very close to bigger loyalist communities, that there would be an invasion, there would be a kind of a mass attack, and it could be like the ethnic cleansing you saw and I saw in the Balkans many years later. It could be on that grand scale, and there was ethnic cleansing going on. People were burned out of their houses. But I do remember people from the south listening and asking me to tell stories about what you saw on the streets of Belfast. It was a traumatic experience for a lot of kids, and I suppose also the kids who met those refugees down here.
It's clear that from a very early age, Rose Lynch had been radicalised by those close to her. As I delve into her background, David is exploring what may have motivated her to become an assassin.
I always tell my students, don't essentialize gender differences. Men can be caring and nurturing, women can be evil. By and large, it's men who murder. It's very rare for a woman to take another person's life. But if I think historically about some of the examples that we know when women have killed, it seems to me that there are a number of types and circumstances in which women will murder. The first is part of a folie à deux. They're part of a killer couple where the man and the woman egg each other on. Clearly, we've got this category that are known as the disciples, people who will form an alliance with a very charismatic male figure. And in relation to these three women, we've got the Manson killers. These are women who attach themselves in a disciple-like way to the American serial killer Charles Manson. We've even got examples from history of people who've killed as part of baby farmers. So if we think about all of those categories, we're left with one question. Which category does Rose Lynch fit into?
So, how influential was her father in her radicalisation, indoctrination into the Republican cause?
Hugely. I mean, her father is very well known here in Limerick for decades for his public involvement in it. He was at one point tried for membership of an illegal organisation, but he was acquitted. So he's no convictions, but he's very, very well known within the Republican movement. And, you know, he'd always been known as somebody who was always handing out leaflets.
How are you, Dad?
Hello.
Grand, usual.
He's very proud of her involvement from such a young age with the Fianna. And then when she was 16, when she joined the official IRA down here. When she was a child, every Sunday they used to go down to the church, the two of them, and he'd hand out the Republican little documents and leaflets and all the rest of it, and she would do that with him and encouraged her all the way through. Encouraged her with her republicanism, and he would always say that, you know, how proud he is of Rose and that she's very staunch. It's a word he uses about her all the time, that you couldn't find anybody more staunch, and to a Republican being called that is a huge compliment.
We are the ones who follow in the footsteps of Pearse, Connolly, Clark.
In November 2011, Rose Lynch, a mother of three, shot dead innocent delivery driver David Darcy. Rose was a committed Republican, but how did she go from being a supporter to being an assassin?
I mean, Republicanism was in her DNA, in her bloodstream, but how did she become involved in the IRA directly?
She stayed in Limerick until she finished school here in Limerick. When she was 16, she joined the full IRA here. After school, she moved to London, where she studied, but she also got involved in sort of the London IRA movement over there.
British and Irish police believe Rose Lynch may have been involved in an IRA cell responsible for a number of attacks in the UK. She made a close association with a man called Patrick Sheehy, who was at one time the most wanted man in Britain.
He was responsible for organising a lot of the bomb attacks over there. So that was a period of her life, really, where you talk about her being radicalised as a young person. She really became radicalised then, and she was always very close to an inner circle, an IRA inner circle, who were organising death. It wasn't as sort of personalised as it is to raise a gun, but at the same time, if you're a part of the organisation of that, you've blood on your hands there. She'd had opportunities in life. She didn't have to follow the Republican movement. She didn't have to go into violence. She had studied, she was intelligent, she had done psychology, she'd done social work in the UK and had worked in it. And at one point, actually, she, a very well-known Republican that she knew and was very close to, committed suicide. And she went to Belfast and she set up, before her time, help and support groups for suicide prevention. So it showed a bit of empathy there. There was some sort of empathy, and yet she was exactly the opposite when she was willing to take up a gun and end a life.
Criminologist Emma Kelly has researched the different elements that may have led Rose Lynch to become an IRA killer.
Emma, what are the processes whereby a young Irish person would become radicalised?
I think in terms of Irish radicalisation, we have to look at the family influences. Irish families in general are close-knit, tight-knit, and so when it comes to their early influences, and certainly in terms of Rose Lynch's relationship with her father, it's very much a case of paternal influences create this idea of radicalisation. And also what that helps with is to normalise these behaviours. If your family are used to certain traditions and trades, then very often that's your norm.
We are the ones who follow in the footsteps of Pearse, Connolly, Clark. We don't do this for careers. We do this for era.
Excuse Rose.
Rose, I met you before.
Probably did.
Yeah, the Limerick area.
That's me. That's the very one.
You still doing the council?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Keeping hard at it, too.
Oh, that's good, yeah. Not a mad bastard, too.
Oh, yeah. Full on. A bit like yourself.
In the 1990s, the peace process in Northern Ireland saw many of Rose Lynch's comrades put down their guns. There was a faction, however, that refused to give up the violence. Known as the Continuity IRA, Rose Lynch was a natural recruit.
So what is the involvement of the Continuity IRA in crime?
The irony is they see themselves as the most ideologically pure of all what we know as the dissident Republican groups. They go all the way back to 1986. Big split within Sinn Féin, then it was one big happy movement. They divided over the majority faction, the people who were led by Gerry Adams and Martin McGuinness, to accept the legitimacy of Dáil and to go into Leinster House. That enraged the minority, a very hardcore ideological grouping based around the late Rory O'Brady, former Chief of Staff of the IRA. And that basically produced this rump element that had a political party called Republican Sinn Féin. And of course, in the history of republicanism, they had to have an armed wing. And they called it the Continuity Army Council, or Continuity IRA.
Was the Continuity's first involvement in crime in the Republic in Dublin as enforcers?
Well, they basically guns for hire. You know, they had some of them had the experience of old stagers in the provisional IRA, you know, doing. And in Dublin, it wouldn't be political assassination. It was mainly robberies and so-called punishment shootings and attacking your political opponents and so on. So naturally, they would be the kind of people that criminal gangs could hire and use. But there's always been, as I say, that kind of collaboration. It's slightly mistrustful of each other, but from time to time, they'll cooperate.
One man who has studied what motivates Ireland's dissident Republicans is psychologist John O'Keefe.
How would the Continuity IRA have viewed Rose Lynch?
In one sense, they would have viewed Rose Lynch very favourably. Rose Lynch comes from a very staunch Republican family. And here was a woman who was prepared to kill on behalf of the cause. And women typically, of course, go under the radar when they're committing violent acts.
I'm interested in Rose Lynch's journey into violence.
Take your time. It's not an easy process.
Here's a woman who's a counsellor. How do you marry up those two backgrounds?
The counselling background is in drugs, it's in deprived areas. So that's the febrile environment in which she lives. And don't forget, there was a political and a military milieu going on all around that. So it wasn't just somebody sitting in their surgery counselling somebody over having a divorce or whatever it might be. It was something much more sinister, dark and connected with criminality.
We often have this idea that radicalised people don't necessarily take action. And sometimes the people who take action aren't particularly radicalised. With Rose Lynch, we seem to have a perfect storm going on, don't we?
And it's not often we get all those ingredients coming at once. It's very unusual. She lives in an army, not the Continuity IRA, but her own family. She's been brought up in an army. Effectively, she's been indoctrinated from day one. She now joins the broader family Continuity IRA. It's only a wonder she didn't kill more.
Okay. So remember your training. Deep breath and squeeze.
If you look back over her criminal history as such, there is a male figure who is sort of a leading light within the Republican organisation.
There seems to be a whiff of cordite, a kind of sexual element to her crimes. Was there a man on the scene?
In the case of the murder of David Darcy, she had been having an affair with a married, very well-known Republican who has a conviction for membership of an illegal organisation. She seemed to have fallen head over heels in love with him. Very, very passionate love affair they were having, and it was, the guards believe it was the two of them who went out to kill together.
It's clear that Rose Lynch was born into the cult of Irish republicanism and was bathed in the mythology of freedom fighters and hunger strikes and the philosophy of the ballot in one hand and the Armalite in the other. But the question for me is, did Irish republicanism create the killer she became, or was she always a killer just waiting for a cause?
Yes.
It's on. You ready?
I am.
Are you prepared to take a life? Perhaps you've taken one before.
When the Continuity IRA looked for an assassin to carry out a hit in Dublin, Rose Lynch answered the call. She was told she was going to kill a drug dealer and was willing and determined to carry out the hit.
This is our target.
The problem was her target wasn't a drug dealer, but an innocent, hard-working family man.
Simply, Rose Lynch as a killer simply defies categorisation. She's an enigma.
She is, because, I mean, she's a female, obviously. She's a 50-year-old mother of 3 who has taken up a gun.
That's our boy, all right.
Having carried out some reconnaissance on him for some days beforehand, so she herself knew exactly what time he was coming out the door. So, you know, she showed the characterizations of a hit woman, in this case, but she's also a little bit of a fanatic when it came to the Republican cause, and that's something that goes all the way back to her childhood.
Yet another murder scene for forensic officers to investigate. The victim this time, Liam Kenny, a 53-year-old father of 4. At 4 o'clock this morning, at least 2 gunmen at Shancastle Avenue in Clondalkin fired shots using a handgun and struck Mr. Kenny a number of times in the upper body. He was later pronounced dead at the Connolly Hospital in Blanchardstown.
In 2011, dissident Republicans were involved in a vicious turf war with Irish criminal gangs. As part of this feud, Liam Kenny, the so-called Continuity IRA commander in Ballyfermot, and a friend of Rose Lynch's father, Joe, was murdered in his home.
We understand that Mr. Kenny used to be a member of Republican Sinn Féin, but had left the organisation some time ago. Some local people have told us they have reason to believe that there may now be a spate of killings as a result of this latest murder.
In the days leading up to his murder, David Darcy continued his life as normal. He had little reason to believe he was going to be the target of a gangland assassination. And why would he? He was an ordinary, hard-working man.
Hello, good morning, welcome to Ireland M. It's Monday the 28th of November.
Now let's take the news with Claire. Thanks, Sinead. A very good morning. An IRA leader who's serving a 20-year jail term is due to give evidence to the Smithick Tribunal today. Michael McKevitt was convicted in 2003 of membership of the real IRA and is serving time for organising terrorist activities. The Smithick Tribunal
Emma, Rose Lynch worked with a male partner. As a criminologist, we label that kind of behaviour, don't we?
So in criminology, we would look at that relationship as something that is referred to as a folie à deux, which essentially means a madness shared by two. What's interesting about Rose Lynch is that there are two possible candidates that fueled this. There is her father, so it may well have been that she was involved in this to seek her fatherly approval. Also, there was a lot of media representation about another relationship that she had with a male who was affiliated with the IRA and the crime underworld. And so what's interesting is it's almost a double folie à deux.
And often when we're thinking about a folie à deux, there's a dominant and a subservient person within that relationship. What role do you think Rose Lynch played?
I think you need to look at the two relationships that she was in separately. So the first instance, you have her father relationship. It was very much that she played the subservient role. However, what's interesting is that as she became the hit woman, in fact, perhaps she was trying to prove herself as the dominant in the other relationship she was involved in.
Crime, especially violent, lethal violent crime, is usually a young man's business. And what my discussion with Emma reminded me of, therefore, is just how unique it is to encounter a woman being prepared to carry out a hit. I was also interested in the discussion that we had about the folie à deux, and I still haven't worked out in my own mind who's actually the players within that folie à deux. Rose Lynch's father, or this other man with whom she has a relationship.
David Darcy had done nothing wrong, but that didn't stop the Continuity IRA setting him up for assassination. His father, Henry, is still looking for answers.
What kind of young lad was David?
He was an all-rounder. He loved his football, he loved a few drinks, and even from the age of 6, 7, he used to ride horses into Smithfield for a friend of his, and they were the big Shergar horses. And he's only a tiny little lad. He left school at 16. He went and he started building kitchens for a friend of his. And then he got into stained glass work with a company in Dublin. And he was there for nearly 4 to 5 years. He loved it for a while, and then he got into this other job that was more money, and so he drove in a van.
What kind of character was he as an adult?
He was a gas character, because you never knew what he was going to do next. He was just happy-go, and he loved going out fishing. We used to go off fishing on the weekends, and he'd have a few cans. He wasn't one for socialising too much in the pubs. He's more at home in the back garden drinking.
So when did you first hear about the shooting?
We heard at 10 to 7 on the Monday morning, and my daughter rang. They say David was shot. I say, which David? Because young David, his son, was staying with us. And I rode into him, and he was in the other room on the phone to his sister, who rang him to say that Dave was shot. So my daughter came along, picked us up, and drove us over.
Cherry Orchard Avenue in Dublin was sealed off after the murder of a local man at around 7 a.m. The Garda Technical Bureau arrived to examine the scene.
And when we got over to Cherry Orchard, and you see your son lying on a cold concrete ground with just a blanket over him, and all you can see is his white shoes, and you can't go over and touch him. The wife was in novice stage, you can imagine, so we would be all there, and just people around, and it was the worst thing any man's or woman's nightmare would be, to see their son in such a, for no apparent reason. I don't know how anybody can describe
looking at your son dead on the ground in miserable conditions. You just can't.
What did the officers say to you at the scene when you arrived?
They could not understand why he was shot. And that's the whole mystery about the sadness about it, is why him? Because we never knew him to do anything wrong.
This is Cherry Orchard, the site of the hit on David Darcy. Now, this hit is both typical and unusual. It's typical because a number of the hits that I've researched have taken place on the doorstep of the victim, and indeed that's exactly where this hit happens. There are a number of instrumental reasons as to why the hit man would choose to commit the crime on the doorstep of the victim. But leave that to one side, because whilst it's typical in terms of its location, this hit is unusual for two different reasons. First of all, the person committing the hit is a woman. It's very unusual for a woman to commit this kind of crime. But secondly, this was the first hit that we know that Rose Lynch has ever taken part in. And despite the fact that she is technically, therefore, a novice, her hit was incredibly skilled. It was very professional. An Opel Astra pulls up, blocks David Darcy into his driveway. Rose Lynch gets out of the passenger side of the car, walks up to David Darcy and kills him. The psychological reframing that needs to have taken place in her head is quite extraordinary. And why does that take place? Is it because she's simply incredibly radicalized and wants to engage in that kind of crime?
The police have been able to piece together some of Rose Lynch's movements in the build-up to the murder of David Darcy. Former detective Brian Cherry knows the mindset of Republican assassins.
From the peace process in '98, huge amount of Caira people and RERA people had been arrested and caught in action. Now that just didn't happen by accident. You know, there was a lot of Garda surveillance mounted on these people. There was a lot of informants used as well.
Why did the Continuity IRA get their intelligence so wrong?
Their real main function was to sort out someone who had murdered one of their members. And they were prepared to listen to anyone who had any information on that. And someone obviously put the finger on David Darcy and said he was involved in this murder in Clondalkin. And even when it became blatantly clear to them afterwards, they still maintained that he was involved in drugs and everything else, despite the fact that everyone knew that he wasn't.
Rose Lynch wasn't finished yet. The Continuity IRA had identified more people they wanted murdered. Police believe that after destroying the car used in the murder of David Darcy, Rose and her accomplice were preparing to kill again.
You've killed an innocent man. How can you be certain there aren't other innocent men on your list?
It's bullshit. Typical fucking lying free staters.
And how did the Gardaí catch Rose Lynch in the end?
We don't have to understand that Rose Lynch was from a well-known Republican family who were well-known by the Gardaí to be involved in dissident Republican actions, and a close watch would have been kept on her and her partner and her father. She was subsequently then arrested about a month later, coming back into Ballyfermot in a car prepared with a list to do another 6 people.
off the wheel. Take your hands off the wheel. Get out of the car. Get out of the car. Get out of the car.
When the police searched Rose Lynch's handbag, they found bullets for a 9mm pistol. And chillingly, they also found a list with the names of 6 more people they'd been ordered to kill. It was clear the authorities had thwarted a potential killing spree.
Rose Lynch, a Republican disciple groomed from the cradle, mother, grandmother, social worker, hit woman. I, for one, think that if she wasn't caught for that murder, she'd have gone on to kill the other 5 on the list and gone into the history books as Ireland's most prolific female killer.
In early 2013, journalist Nicola Tallant confronted Joe Lynch about his daughter's crimes. She asked him if other people were involved in the murder of David Darcy.
You know that, gone to special branch, and the family says there was more people involved. I wouldn't have any idea whether there was or not, you know. As far as I know, she let her pass in the court. She didn't name anyone else, which I wouldn't agree if she did.
And do you know, did she ever take up arms before for the cause?
Well, I reckon any woman or man who joins the Republican movement, who don't go through life in the Republican movement, would have been an active service. Rosie was always very political minded. She was always there through the hair blocks, campaigned against the special criminal court being set up. She would have been a Republican at heart.
No possibility the CIA intelligence got it wrong? No. Absolutely not.
Oh, that's really interesting. This is the point at which Nicola Tallant says, you got the wrong man. She killed the wrong man. Do you accept that? And it's the first time Joe Lynch looks uncomfortable. He looks away entirely, not just from Nicola Tallant, but he looks away from the audience that he's addressing his statements to. He looks completely to his right because he's uncomfortable with the information that the wrong person got killed.
There's no possibility the CIA intelligence got it wrong?
No.
Absolutely not.
The guy said one thing that, look, how do you get things wrong? If your people pass your own intelligence to build up players like this, because neighbours know what neighbours are up to.
This is a very interesting interview that Joe Lynch gave to Nicola Tallant because, first of all, it's not really a conversation, it's not really an interview. Even his body language is pointed out at the audience. So this a man who's standing by his daughter. This is a man who's making a statement rather than being interviewed. This is a man who's completely and utterly determined to maintain a particular public profile in relation to what happened to his daughter.
In 2013, Rose Lynch pleaded guilty to the murder of David Darcy and was sentenced to life imprisonment.
Rose Lynch was jailed for life yesterday after admitting shooting the father of two as he was leaving for work in November 2011. She claimed his house was a safe house for a criminal drugs gang and he had been paid €20,000 for his involvement in the killing of a Continuity IRA branch leader. The Gardaí have categorically denied this, describing David as an honest, hard-working man, and Lynch was either misinformed or it was mistaken identity.
The people that gave the wrong information about my son, they're still there.
15 months after the murder of David Darcy, his family still have one question: why?
Unrepentant to the end, as she was led away to begin her life sentence, she raised her fist in defiance and shouted, "Chucky our law."
And somebody was trying to explain to me what it meant, and to myself I said, how got she, a mother, kill another woman's son? And in the courts, just laughing.
What was your reaction when you saw Rose Lynch in court?
Oh, horrifying. Absolutely. And every month, she was trying to get bail on different conditions, this and that. And when the wife went the first time, she was totally, we just couldn't let her go. She nearly had a breakdown. I mean, the rest of the family used to always go nearly every month. And that went on for nearly 30 months, I think.
Did you ever think you would meet the face of pure evil until you saw Rose Lynch?
No, never. She wouldn't look at me or my family. She'd look at her own family and just wave and blow kisses, and as if my son never existed. And it was true, but she didn't care.
What she did and what she said and how she nearly celebrated, it's beyond someone's cruel imagination.
Oh, definitely, yeah. When she came out, she's so calm, so cool. It's like, Jesus, what's this? And then start doing this, blowing kisses and waving. And you're sitting there. Your son, he was an innocent man. And what's all this? I'm a Republican. But no, it's the most hurtful thing that anybody and any woman who had a child can endure.
David Darcy's family say they will never forgive the woman who murdered him after clapping loudly when Rose Lynch was jailed. Lynch insisted that she acted alone in what she described as the execution of David Darcy, but Gardaí believe she had a male accomplice.
It's been 15 months of pure misery since our son was taken from us. For no reason, absolutely. And for these people to come along and salute, their hands up in the air, and say it's for Ireland, can't they? They're just cowards.
So, David, how would you categorise Rose Lynch?
Rose Lynch, Donal, an incredibly fascinating case, but how are we to make sense of her as a hit woman? Is she a gun for hire, or is she simply radicalized in a Republican tradition?
Modern-day dissident republicanism is so immersed in criminality and heavy crime that she has to be called a criminal. And if I was going to categorize her, I would say a novice, and because of the overarching influence and echoes of republicanism, I would nearly say a new category, political novice.
I'd be very happy to see her as a novice in our typology, but remember, there's a lot of structural history there that she's bringing to that novice hit. Why do you think, though, she's never been prepared to accept that she did take out the wrong victim?
I think, well, it's easy to understand why she refuses to accept that she committed and killed an innocent person, because that would completely undermine her motivation. It completely would I suppose her sense of self would disintegrate. Her reaction to that demonstrates exactly how long she has been in that cause and the role she played in it. But it's a very different role to be an organizer, a facilitator, to being a killer.
From the 9-1, switch that over, that's the young blonde. I was at the West Coast, now I'm in the East Coast. Saw you when